Hello, dear polymer clay enthusiast. I'm Mihaela from Learn Polymer Clay, and in today's tutorial, I want to show you the result of putting together a classic polymer technique, which is the Swirl Lentil Bead and nail art foils. And I think that the result is worth the effort of transferring nail art foils onto polymer clay and onto going back to the basics and making beautiful swirl lentil beads. So in order to make these beautiful swirl lentil beads, I started by transferring nail art foils onto a sheet of polymer clay that I passed to the setting number 4 of my Atlas pasta machine, and I decided to use for these swirl beads. I decided to use pink, purple, blue nail art foil with a holographic effect. And so I placed two such foils on top of the sheet of polymer clay, and then I used my fingers to rub these uh, foils onto the clay, and then I lift up a corner, and I've checked if the foil transferred well. If not, I had to use the scraps and insist in some places and rub scraps from the nail art foil in those places that were not decorated with foils from the first attempt. And then I'm going to use a round cutter to cut out 1.5 of uh, pieces decorated with nail art transfer, and I am going to use these pieces to decorate two round beads that I have previously prepared, and I am going to use the scrap decorated with nail art transfer to decorate these round beads. And depending on the size of the beads that you are using, you will end up with larger swirl beads or smaller swirl beads. But I intended to use these beads to make earrings, so I didn't want to have beads that are too large. And then I rolled these beads in the middle of the palm, and you'll have to prepare an acrylic block, and you'll have to place the round bead on your table, and then you'll just have to use the acrylic block and rotate this bead. But the most important thing is to keep the block parallel to your working table. So when I'm making this type of swirl beads, I'm not concentrating on the bead. I'm concentrated on my block, on my acrylic block, to be parallel with my working table. And from time to time, I would stop, I would look at the bead, and I decide if I liked it, if I want to swirl it a little bit more, to rotate it a little bit more. And when you do this with different colors of polymer clay, you might want to rotate it a little bit more, because the more you rotate it, the more swirls you'll get on your design. But for these foil transfers, I didn't want to do it too much, because I was afraid I would not have a very good definition of the colors, and I like them as they are. And then I decided to attach a screw pin, and I used a little bit of liquid clay, and I will just screw the screw pin inside the bead. And I recommend you to use gloves for such beads, when manipulating such beads, because there is a risk when handling these beads, there is a risk to leave fingerprints. And then I've baked the beads for 45 minutes in the preheated oven, and I tinted them with an aluminum baking pan. I let the clay cool down, and then I decided to use UV resin to glue such rhinestones. Because I've used for my trial pieces, I tried to press the rhinestones into the bead, but I had a lot of distortions, so I think it's rather difficult to decorate the beads with rhinestones and press them into the clay and avoid leaving fingerprints when not working with gloves. And then I tried to put them on metallic cutters, but they wouldn't. I couldn't fit them well. So finally, I decided to put them on small balls of scrap clay. And then I am just going to use UV resin and the brush, and I am going to apply a thin layer of UV resin on these beads. But keep in mind that the shape of the beads is particular, is concave, and you should be very careful not to put too much resin to avoid drippings. And um, after applying a thin layer of resin, I would use the pocket UV lamp to cure the resin for 1 minute, and then um, I would put the beads under my larger nail art UV lamp and cure them for 7 minutes. To be honest, I like the beads without the resin and with resin on top. And normally, for other designs, I prefer the beads with resin on top. But for this kind of swirl beads with nail art foils, I have to tell you that I'm not sure which side I prefer, because I did not put resin on the back. If I prefer the side with the resin on top, or if I prefer the back with no resin. Thank you for watching the tutorial. Please tell me in the comments what you think about this idea of using nail art foils with the classic swirl bead technique, and stay tuned for more inspiration for your work with polymer clay.